Hi there, LWT 242 Group Fitness Instructor students. This PowerPoint presentation is for Chapter 5 in your textbook, which deals with designing a class blueprint. So basically we're looking at designing a lesson plan because we are teaching a group. So it's always good, the newer the instructor, the more important it is to write out a class design and a class plan and actually practice it. So the newer you are in leading group fitness, it's so important to have a plan in place, have it written down, practice it. So we're going to be looking at things in this chapter on how to design that plan, how to create some objectives for the class and apply those components of the class and appropriate types of movements and rehearsal movements and things like that. So while some aspects of a class experience cannot always be controlled, such as mishaps with our audio equipment, the group fitness instructor should make it a point to plan as many aspects as possible, including devising a backup plan should something unexpectedly arise. Effective group fitness instructors begin this systematic planning process by first identifying the overall goal of the class and the intended outcome for the participants. So determining beforehand these aspects of class can definitely improve the experience not only for our participants but also for the instructor. So first of all, we want to identify the class purpose. So what is the goal of your class? And what are the types of participants that you're trying to attract that are going to be coming into your class? So for example, maybe it's an indoor cycling class with a goal to increase cardiorespiratory endurance. Or maybe it's a yoga class that's designed to decrease stress and promote relaxation. So first and foremost, we need to think about what is the purpose of our class and who do we want to attract. Also, we want to make sure that we remain true to the class description. So we have to appropriately name our class. This is going to help to attract those people for whom the format would be most appropriate. So for example, if we title a class Senior Fitness, it tells us that it's for older adults. But if we instead title it Chair Aerobics for active agers, that might be better because not only does it tell us who the class is for, seniors or active agers, and also it descriptively expresses what the participants can expect. It's a chair aerobic class. So when we're determining a title or a name for our class, it should denote two different things. Number one, who is it for or who is it geared towards? And number two, it describes what they can expect. So think about that when you're making a title or a name for your class. And then three, we want to establish objectives. So this is going to capture the knowledge and the skills that participants should be able to exhibit following instruction. So if you look on page 79 in your textbook, you can see common class objectives. So take a minute, pause the video, and look at page 79 in your book at those common class objectives. Next up in designing a class plan, we want to look at the three phases of a class. So mainly we like to break it up into the warm-up, followed by the conditioning phase, and ending with the cool-down phase. So in our warm-up, we want it to be dynamic, right? Movement needs to be involved. Most warm-ups are anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes, and it's designed to gradually increase the intensity. In the warm-up, a lot of times we choose exercises that are going to enhance the stability and mobility in our ankles, our hips, our thoracic spine, and our shoulders. Also, we increase the amount of rehearsal moves in the warm-up. And if you look back under this weekly module, week 4, please take a minute and view the short video on rehearsal moves and incorporating rehearsal moves into our warm-ups. But rehearsal moves are basically designed to preview what is to come in the conditioning segment. Maybe we don't do it to the full intensity as we would do in our conditioning segment, but it's kind of a preview and at a lower impact or a lower intensity version that we would do when we get into the conditioning segment. When we move into the conditioning segment, we also want to look at our exercise evaluation. So we want to include exercises that are going to mimic the 5 primary movement patterns. Those movement patterns are things like bend and lift, single leg movements, push movements, pull movements, and rotating movements. So in that conditioning phase, many times we include different types of movements that are going to mimic those primary movement patterns. Also, we want to scale our exercise intensity. So that means showing regressions and progressions. Also, the harder the conditioning segment is, the more extensive the warm-up should be. So we might want to lengthen the time of our warm-up if we have a very strenuous conditioning segment. And lastly, we have our cool-down segment. Cool-down segments generally last anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes as well. It's designed to decrease our heart rate and also decrease venous pooling. We want to keep moving during that cool-down segment to effectively circulate that blood back to the heart so the heart can replenish it with oxygen and send it back to the rest of the body. Therefore, people don't get lightheaded or dizzy. In addition to that, we like to include stretching and maybe some reflection. A lot of times, instructors tend to incorporate things like myofascial release or foam rollers. When considering special populations, longer warm-ups are very important for older adults and for deconditioned individuals as well. If you look on page 82 and 83 in your textbook, you'll see some warm-up ideas to enhance stability and mobility. Next, you can see your class blueprint planning sheet. This is what we are going to be using to design our own class. At the end of the semester, each of you will be teaching a 1-hour group fitness class, and this is what your lesson plan is going to look like. This is often seen as a cheat sheet. A class blueprint helps the group fitness instructor prepare for, to plan and practice the core components of the class, applying the most up-to-date evidence-based information to ensure safe and effective movement experiences for our participants. When we look at exercise evaluation criteria, group fitness instructors should consider physiological, biomechanical, and psychological factors for any exercise or movement pattern. To this end, an exercise evaluation can be done for each movement in our class to determine its effectiveness and safety. So number 1, what is the objective of the exercise? Is it designed to improve our cardiorespiratory fitness? Is it designed to improve our strength, our endurance, our flexibility? Does it improve our ability to perform activities of daily living? What is the objective of this particular exercise? Number 2, what muscles are being worked during the exercise or the skill? What are the joint actions? What's the position of the body to effectively work the muscle targeted? Number 3, do the benefits of the exercise outweigh the potential risks? So does the exercise begin from a point of stability and add mobility within a safe range of motion? And number 4, can this movement or skill be scaled to various ability levels? So who are my participants? Can I offer regressions or progressions of this particular exercise? So when we design our classes, we can look at all these exercises that we're performing and apply these 4 questions to them. So we're going to take a minute and think through this. When designing a group strength class, you decide to include dumbbell front squats within the conditioning phase. How could you scale the exercise intensity to ensure the safety and success of all participants by offering both more accessible and more challenging exercise options? Take a minute and give me examples of ways you could offer regressions and ways you can offer progressions to this exercise. Pause the video and write those down. Some scaling options for regressions could include reducing or removing the load, decreasing the lever length by placing your hands on your hips, and even decreasing the range of motion of your squat. Scaling options for offering progressions could include increasing the load, increasing the speed of the movement within reason, and increasing the range of motion of your squat. Intelligently structured and sequenced classes, number one, offer appropriate exercise order. So we want to determine what is that order. And normally most classes start with the warm-up, they move into that conditioning phase, and finish with that cool-down phase. Also, we could look at ordering it by doing multi-joint exercises to single joint exercises. So for example, during the strength portion of your class, maybe we're performing squats, that's a multi-joint exercise, down to performing a leg extension or a leg curl, which is a single joint exercise. Also offer mindful transitions. So try to avoid quick changes in our body positioning. So this can produce things like supine hypotension. So for example, when you're seated and you go to a standing position rather quickly, or when you're laying down and you sit up quickly or you stand up quickly, we can become lightheaded, and that decreases our blood pressure. So be careful of your transitions from sitting to standing or laying down to standing or sitting. Also, making sure that our approach is balanced. Looking at exercises that are functional. We can apply them to activities of daily living. Think about our participants and what are some things that people in our classes maybe have difficulty performing while at home or while on the job. Creating exercises that can help them to perform activities of daily living that are functional in nature are going to be very helpful for our participants. Also, performing exercises in all of those planes of motion. Lots of directional movement, not only front and backward types of movement, but lateral side-to-side movements and even rotational movements are going to be very helpful. And lastly, using opposing muscle groups, making sure that it's balanced. If we do exercises on the right side of the body, making sure that we do those same number of exercises on the left side of the body. If we do exercises for our hamstrings, for example, the opposing muscle group for that would be the quadriceps. So we want to make sure that we're doing exercises for opposing muscle groups in those workouts as well. And lastly, your work to recovery ratio. Be careful of your intervals. A lot of times we want to give appropriate recovery in between exercises. So for example, if you're doing a circuit-based class and your work ratio of the class is 30 seconds, a 1-to-1 ratio would be 30 seconds of work and 30 seconds of rest. That's a 1-to-1 ratio. Or sometimes if the work intervals are very, very intense, allowing a longer rest period is better. So a 1-to-2 ratio would be something like 30 seconds of work followed by a minute of rest or maybe a minute of lower intensity types of exercises. So structuring our classes is very, very important as well. And that's going to minimize the risk of injury too. Another question to think through. So when you're teaching a dance-based fitness class, what movements could you incorporate into the class sequence to create balance between opposing muscle groups in the body? When evaluating exercises, be sure to consider the joint actions that are taking place, as well as the muscles that are producing the movements. Take a minute, pause the video, and answer those questions. To answer these questions, we have to look at opposing muscle groups. Opposing muscle groups occur on opposite sides of the joints. Programming movement that targets agonists and antagonists pairs opposing muscle groups. So for example, knee lifts, That's hip flexion using the hip flexors. Knee lifts paired with straight leg glute extensions. Glute extensions are hip extension using the gluteals. So a knee lift followed by a hip extension, a straight leg glute hip extension, is a great way to pair opposites together. Or another example could be rowing paired with pushing. So rowing is shoulder extension using the upper back and anterior shoulder muscles. Pushing would be shoulder flexion using the chest and posterior shoulder muscles. So we are going to be working on a class blueprint in the next few weeks. So start thinking about the types of class that you want to be teaching, and start thinking about how we can create effective movement patterns within our classes.